Thank you very much. It's a great honor and pleasure to talk to you today. I would like to start actually with this picture that we all know of the blue marble that's called Earth, that it's photographed from space, just to show you how much water we have on Earth. It's a blue-green planet. But of course, that's only one perspective. If you would ask one of my colleagues that studies the deep Earth, they would actually view the Earth like this. So you see the volume of the water of the ocean, that is the big marble that you see, but it's really tiny or small compared to the actual volume of hard rock that we have, or of the Earth and its deep interior. And the fresh water is even smaller, it's hardly visible, and there's a very tiny speck. I'm not going to point it out because it's difficult to see, but it's a very tiny speck, and that's all the water we have in the rivers at some time. So the volume of water compared to the volume of the Earth doesn't seem to be that big. Yet, it's quite a lot still. And of course, we know that most of that water that we have on Earth is in the oceans. About 97.5% of that water is in the oceans, and only 2.5% is fresh water that is on land. And of that, 2/3 is frozen. So it's in the glaciers on land, but mostly it's in Antarctica and Greenland in the ice sheets. And what is sort of surprising is that most of the water actually that we have that is not frozen and fresh is groundwater. It's water we don't even see. It's below our feet. It's stored between the pores of the grains in the soil and the sediments below our feet, or in the cracks and the pores of rocks. This groundwater yet is still an important source of water for humankind, as I will show later. Now, I've also showed a table there, I won't go into it very deeply, of the volume of water we have, and you can see it's 1 million cubic kilometers. Now, I'm sorry, I'm from Europe, so I'm using the metric system here. But to give you an idea on how big that is, I just showed you Lake Erie. That has a volume of 480 cubic kilometers, which is about 115 cubic miles, right? So just to give you a little bit of a perspective. And we're talking about millions of cubic kilometers here, so that's vast amounts of water. And I talked about groundwater being an important store of water. Well, as you can see here from this table, a little bit more than half of that groundwater, that's about 12.5 million, is saline. So that's water that isn't fresh. And why is that? Well, that water has been there for ages in contact with rocks and often salty deposits, and it's basically taken up salts and minerals from those rocks and became salty. And also, if you go close to the coast, most of the water is groundwater close to the coast is also, because of the sea intrusion, also relatively brackish and saline. Still, there's a lot of water there that is fresh and fluid and available, mostly in groundwater, a little bit in lakes and rivers. And if you count that all up, it's enough to supply the current human water needs for 5,000 years. So no issue, no problem, right? I mean, lots of water. And on top of that, we get free water every year. The water I was talking about here before is basically water that's in our saving account. But we also have a yearly income. And that's 450,000 cubic kilometers of water that is in our rivers and lakes that flows to the ocean. And why do we have this? That's because of the water cycle. And maybe you know from your high school geography lectures that over the ocean we have more evaporation than precipitation. And that excess evaporation is being transported to the land by the general atmospheric circulation. That also brings our weather here. And that rains out over land. And about 65% of that water that rains out over land evaporates again. But 35%, which is this 45,000 cubic kilometer, ends up in the river and runs to the ocean. And that water can be used by humans. And we're using it, that water. We're using it in different ways. Of course, we have water from the tap. We flush our toilets with it, so we have domestic use of water. We use water for industrial processes, for all kinds of manufacturing needs, lots of water. Think about paper mills, for instance. We use it for power generation. We build these dams and we use the altitude difference with turbines to generate electricity. But the most of the water use goes into growing crops. About more than 70% of all the water that is used by humans is by irrigation. And that picture on the top right corner shows you so-called crop circles. You can find them in, for instance, in Egypt or Tunisia, but you can also find them in the US Midwest. And what they show is basically in the middle of that circle, they pump up groundwater, and they use these sprinkler systems that rotate, and then apply the water to the crops. And that is the reason they can grow crops in more hot climates. And we use models to calculate how much water we use. So these are the numbers of water in cubic kilometers again, of the different sectors water use. This is actually the water they take out. That's not all the water they use. Some of the water that they take out is being used and then returned back to the river. Think about, for instance, cooling power plants. You're not hardly using any of the water. Most of the water is basically used to cool the plant, and then it gets back into the river. But of course, for crops, most of the water is being used and evaporates after it's being applied to the plants. Now you can see here that most of the water, again, is used by irrigation. That's the top left picture. And if we zoom into the US, that's the lower, on the top right panel, that's the lower left picture. You can see that most of the irrigation water used in the US is in California, which is the fruit basket of the US, obviously, and parts of the world. The Midwest, where we have a big aquifer system that has a lot of groundwater, using a lot of groundwater there. It's called the High Plains Aquifer, and in the Mississippi embayment. So those are the areas where most of the irrigation is taking place in the US. Now you might ask yourself, there's lots of water. Every year we get water, and if this water use is only, even 10%, 20% of what we get every year, so why is there a problem? Why do we have a water shortage? Well, there's a number of reasons for that. And the first one has to do with timing. If you would make a plot of when water is most needed and when it's available, it looks a little bit like this. And it makes sense, of course. When do you irrigate crops? When there's no rainfall, right? So that's in times, usually in the summer, the warm season, when rivers are low, when there's little rainfall, and when lake levels are low and so on. So the water supply and the water demand are out of phase. That's first. The second reason has to do with where most of the irrigated agriculture takes place. It's often in areas that are relatively warm and dry. And why is that? Well, crops need not only water, they need good enough high temperatures and they need radiation to grow. So they go to the fringes of where rainfall will allow you to grow crops because you have really long, hot, warm summers with lots of radiation. And if you have the water by irrigation, then you can get high crop yields. So that's usually in the semi-arid, not so very wet regions of the world. And then finally, a lot of the water that we have is difficult to attain. It's there in the ground, but it's too deep to get out. So it takes too much energy costs and drilling costs to get the water out. So what we have done for National Geographic is use these models that were talked about. I'll talk a little bit about these models, but not too much, to calculate how much water these different sectors need and what are the water shortages there. Now, before we do that, I want to show you what we're actually modeling here in our computing models. That's what we called the land part of the hydrological cycle or water cycle. Now, this wonderful diagram was issued last year by the USGS, the United States Geological Survey. And it's so nice because apart from your textbook diagrams of the hydrological cycle that you may remember, this also has the human impact in it. It shows irrigation taking place. It shows industry extracting water. It also shows that a lot of groundwater is being used. If you look, I'm not sure if this works. Yeah, if you look at here in this part, you can see that that groundwater is being used and groundwater resources are being depleted to have irrigation going on. So that's really nice. And what we typically do then is we divide the world into little pieces of 10 by 10 kilometers. And for each of those little grid cells, we set up a model that describes how a drop of water, what will happen, what is its fate. Is it entering the soil or is it run off to the river directly? Is it taken up by the roots of a plant? Is it being taken out for irrigation and applied to a field and so on? And that's what we do. And these models need a lot of data. So if this is the model in the middle, you can see we need data about temperature, precipitation, but we also need data about soil, land, altitude on the one hand, and we need what we call socio-economic data. Data on where the people live, what are the population densities, what is the groundwater that is being pumped, what is the water demand of the different sectors, and so on. So these things together, we put in the model, and what we get out of it is how much water is in the soil, how much is in the river, how much is in the groundwater, how does that change over time, but also how much water do the people need and how much do they have shortage, what's the shortage of water. So that's what we're calculating. So we'll basically, if you go to, the results are there. If you go to worldwatermap.nationalgeographic.org or you just Google World Water Map, www, you basically find that website and you can explore where in your region, you know, how is water being used by, what is the water used for domestic, for industry and for the irrigation sector, but also if there are water shortages in your region. And you can also explore how that changes over time. Because as you can see, there's a time axis here, right? So you can move this slider and see how that changes over time. Now, up to now, we've been talking about the human side of water use. We need that water. And do we have a shortage of it? But of course, if we start using water, it has an impact on the system. And we try to calculate it as well. If you imagine a river and you live around here, this is probably what a river looks like, right? I mean, it's a pristine blue ribbon running through a very nice, quiet landscape. But of course, in many parts of the world, this is what a river looks like. It's heavily being used, it's being navigated, water is being taken out, but a lot of pollutants is also dumped in the river because it's easy. You just put it in the river and it flows to the ocean and you get rid of your waste. And that's happened a lot. And we try to also simulate that in our computers. This animation it's quite busy, so I'll try to run you through but here on the left you see the number of reservoirs, big reservoirs that are being built since the 1900s worldwide. And you can see it's about 6,000. And is the total volume of water that is stored behind those reservoirs. And what you can see on the top figure, you see these rivers turning red. That means they don't have any natural flow anymore. It means that there's a reservoir and a dam on there, and it controls the runoff and the flow. And that has a big impact on fish species, for instance, because in two ways. You alter the natural high and low regime of the river. That is going to change in time. But also, these dams are basically they are obstacles for fish to migrate. And they have therefore big impact on fish populations. And mind you, these are only the largest 6,000 reservoirs. It's estimated there are about 50,000 reservoirs worldwide, with dams higher than 50 meters being built on our world's rivers. Another impact is the drying of the Aral Sea. That picture didn't, unfortunately didn't show up, but it's basically supposed to have shown how the Aral Sea is drying. You see the extent of the Aral Sea in 1990 and now, and you basically see that it's gone. Anyway, it's quite an iconic picture showing, and the drying of the Aral Sea has to do with the fact that they are fed by two rivers, and one of that is the Sirdaria and the Amu-Daria, and they have their sources in the high mountains of Asia, close to the Himalayas. And what happens is that halfway in the drier parts, that's about here and there, water is taken out of the river, diverted to irrigate cotton fields. It already started in the Soviet time to do that. It's still going on, and that means that there's no more or little water flowing into the Aral Sea while it's still evaporating, and that has an impact on its size, and therefore it shrinks. The next example has to do, and then I'm almost close to closing, is that we see the salinity and organic pollution and pathogen pollution in our rivers and how this changes over time. And wherever it's red, you see an increase in pollution levels. And this has to do with the fact that population growth is higher than, say, the building of sewage plants, treatment plants. So population grows, but sewage treatment plants are not growing at the same pace, and you see an increase in pollution. Now, what we did with National Geographic, before I turn it over to the next speakers, is that we're looking at these hotspots of water scarcity, where also these environmental issues are there. And the thing is that we're not only doing the science there, trying to understand what are the drivers behind that water scarcity and the detrimental effects there, but we also cooperate with storytellers, that are people that go into those regions and tell the story of the people there. And that's very important for us, because it really shows how people are dealing in their day-to-day lives with water scarcity, but also how they cope with it, what type of coping mechanisms are there. And that will help us actually a lot to understand which of the measures we have to try out to alleviate water scarcity worldwide. And with that, I would like to give the floor to the next speaker. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So I am going to take you on a little bit of a journey that I was working in Nigeria in I wouldn't call it a village because it's much bigger than that, but it's called Makoko, and it's outside of Lagos, Nigeria. And it's home to 250,000 people, making it one of the largest water-based communities in the world. Makoko is informal and unregulated, and the government would prefer for it not to exist, and has tried several times to evict its residents with violent outcomes. Despite their challenges, I couldn't help to be impressed by how they made society work. And this experience sparked an idea for me about a global project focusing on communities that live permanently on water. As the global population approaches 9 billion people, climate change is accelerating the rising sea levels, and governments are now more inclined to explore innovative living solutions. It's estimated by by 2050, the 800 million people living in 570 cities worldwide will face the necessity of relocation. While sea level walls currently stand as the primary defense against the rising waters, the conversation is now gradually shifting towards adaptation. So I started this project with a question. Is it possible for communities to live on water, and is this a sustainable way for people to live? And I wanted to look at traditional ways people have been doing it and modern ways people are doing it. And I began my journey in Benin, in a village called Gambier. And Gambier is located on a lake between Nigeria and Benin. It's called Nokalakai, and it's called the Venice of Africa. Gambier's roots traces back to the 17th century, when, in order to escape slavery, the Tofino tribe settled on the lake to escape a rival tribe that was trying to sell them into slavery. But the rival tribe believed a demon lived on the lake, and so they wouldn't come there to try to find them. And so they basically built a refuge on water. This settlement, named Gambier, meaning we survived, has evolved into a vibrant community and is home to about 45,000 people who live in over 3,000 homes, made out of red ebony wood, bamboo, and palm fronds. The village design consists of artificial islands, wide water streets, facilitating social interaction in a close-knit community life. The Tofino tribe's intimate relationship with water has cultivated an innovative aquaculture system called the Akaja method, which uses local mangroves and bamboo to create fish badogs, fostering a rich aquatic ecosystem. In recent years, there's been reports in a sharp decline in fish due to increased population and pollution. Children who live there develop walking skills later in life, and parents will bring their children to artificial areas so toddlers can practice walking. Colette runs a successful grinding service in Gambier, where she processes ingredients like tomatoes and peppers, but she has to stay vigilant about keeping lake water from contaminating the food. This celestial church stands on a man-made island, and the religion requires the removal of shoes and for women to cover their hair upon entry as a sign of respect and humility. Gambier faces challenges from tourism and modern constructions. Problems such as sewage disposal and growing poverty rates among fishermen endanger their distinct lifestyle. And as Gambier navigates its future, it still continues to inspire with the story of survival. My next stop on this journey was in Holland, to a little community called Schoonschip, meaning clean ship in Dutch. And it began as a dream by a group of environmentally conscious individuals. This community is located in Amsterdam and represent a unique blend of innovation and communal living. They live in 46 households with over 100 residents. Each home in Schoonschip is a marvel of modern engineering and eco-friendly design. Everything is meticulously planned, from solar panels to green roofs to rainwater harvesting systems. The community boasts a smart grid for energy distribution, and they also have an innovative water purifying system, turning this village into a model for self-sufficiency. It's a community that has a lot of young families, and bedrooms are often located beneath water level. Here is 3-year-old Sime, whose bedroom is underwater and is showcasing a clear fascination with the aquatic life. Skånship's journey was challenging, securing financing, navigating legal waters, and the technical complexities of constructing homes had significant hurdles. But this community persevered and turned all these challenges into triumphs, and the project took about 10 years to be completed. Some of the houses are shared between two families. This is Martin and Lynn, parents of 2 children in a family living in Skånship, and they describe their family home more like a Tetris than in a straight line. Pairing families in the community was similar to speed dating, where families would interview each other to see if they could share a structure. Martin spoke about the initial plans for affordable housing, but financial constraints showed pretty soon that that wasn't possible. And Lynn, his wife, spoke about the complexity of achieving true sustainability. And in hindsight, felt that an apartment building with shared resources would have probably been more sustainable. Nevertheless, Skånship offers a compelling narrative of adaptation and innovation, proving that communities can indeed float, not just above water, but above the traditional constraint of urban living. I also went to Bangladesh. That is home to one of the largest river deltas in the world. And this is a country that is deeply intertwined with water. Its geographical position exposes it to sea level rise from the south and glacier melts from the north. And it has a dynamic monsoon season. This creates a unique water-dominated landscape and is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. Floating gardens here have become a lifeline. These indigenous structures, primarily built from water hyacinths, are a low-cost, sustainable solution for farming, especially during the monsoon season. This is Mohammed, who's carrying on the farming heritage passed on by his family. Having cultivated the land since childhood, he now skillfully adapts his farming techniques to the rhythm of the seasons. In the current season, he focuses on seed farming, while in other times he'll farm banana trees and green chilies. While these gardens have a long history, there's been a revival in recent years, emphasizing their importance and also considering them as an essential tool for adapting to climate change and alleviating poverty. Seeds are gently wrapped in water hyacinths, a crucial first step before they're taken out to the fields. Despite their successes, concerns still linger about their long-term viability. Factors like heavy rains, tides, and reduced water hyacinth growth due to flooding challenge their sustainability. These realities underscore a vital role of floating gardens in a country where agricultural land is dwindling and waterlogging has become more frequent. Every Saturday morning until noon, a floating market takes place, both filled with various goods, trade directly amongst each other. This is Mohammed, and he works a piece of land owned by somebody who lives from abroad. He was telling me that the owner would send him YouTube videos about how to grow different crops. And on this day, he was very proud to show me that he had grown dragon fruit, which is a crop relatively new to the area. As Bangladesh navigates the complexities of climate change, these floating farms could be a path forward. The last stop on my journey was Peru, in Lake Titicaca, where I visited the Urus, which is an ancient community living on man-made islands outside of the town of Puno. A well-made island can last up to 30 years, and the Urus originally built these islands to escape a more aggressive neighboring tribe, creating a unique way of life. Their culture revolves around the tatura reeds, using them for building homes and boats, and even as a food resource. Every 2 weeks, new layers of tatura must be added on top, and it's a very communal effort, and it's imperative for the island to keep afloat. The Urus lifestyle had to adapt over the years, and while they still maintain traditional fishing and bird hunting practices, tourism has become an increasingly important part of their economy. This influx of visitors has changed their island structures and living conditions. Most of the islands now have solar panels and functioning toilets. The islanders are known for their Tutura reed boats that they use for transportation and fishing, although this is a more common sight that you'll see just pushing tourists around. Today, there's approximately 120 islands that has about 6 to 7 families living on each of them. To ensure that the islands doesn't drift away, the base is securely anchored into the lake bed. The islands used to be more remote, but when a storm hit the lake in 1986, the winds from the north were so strong that entire islands were swept away. And this became a turning point for the community, and so they moved closer to the city of Puno. Today, young men will go to the cities for work, and residents will go shopping on Saturdays, and the communities have started interacting more frequently with the mainland. The Urus demonstrate remarkable ability to adapt, balancing ancient traditions with modern challenges. Despite the changes and the impact of tourism, the essence of the Urus' lives will be tied to the Tutura reeds. As long as these reeds flourish in the lake, the foundational culture and the lifestyle of the Urus people would continue, rooted in their historic and adaptive relationship to the lake. After completing this journey, my conclusion was to my initial question is yes, people can live on water, but the success depends heavily on the proximity to land. And each community that I visited presented innovation and different insights about how this can be done, but also very strong challenges. And our journey with water is not just about survival. It's about reimagining our future. A future where we don't just live alongside water, but with it in harmony and respect. The ripples of change are already here, and I am very excited to see where it takes us next. Thank you very much.
And now, from that watery world, I am going to whisk you away to the youngest desert on Earth. It's about maybe 108 Fahrenheit. I had to do that calculation before speaking because we speak in Celsius. It's about 108 Fahrenheit there. It's a hot, hot June day. The hairs on the back of your neck will stand up because of the sun just pricking you. And it's been 2 years since they've had any rain. Right? So no rain for 2 years, 22 months actually. I'm on this dune, and I'm sitting with my shepherd farmer friend, Chatar Singh. And wordlessly, he digs into the dune, and not 6 inches in, he comes up with wet sand. How? This place has not seen rain for 22 months. And he tells me, these barefoot hydrologists, these barefoot geologists, these barefoot ecologists who walk the deserts tell me that the dunes hold water in their bellies. And it's not about divining water, it's just about knowing how to read the land, and you will know how to survive even on just 4 inches of annual rain in a year. And so we climb down from the dune. He does it elegantly. I do it rather clumsily, because anybody who's climbed down from a dune knows that it's not very easy. But at the bottom of the dune, at every few yards, we see hand-dug wells. And these wells are giving wells. They're still spewing water. The shepherds bring up the water, and the well pulls in more water. They're percolation wells. They pull in more water from the sides and replenish themselves. If you put your ear to the well, you can hear it tinkling, the water droplets coming in to refresh the well. And this is the mainstay of these pastoralists who live in these lands. We are in the youngest desert on earth and also the most populated desert. We are in the Thar Desert in the western state of Rajasthan in India. I don't know if you guys have been there, but if some of you have, you know what I'm talking about. It is a crowded place, and it is dry. These people are mostly pastoralists. They walk with their gold, and their gold are goat and sheep, which they sell for meat. So if any of you has been to North India and eaten a Rogan Josh or a mutton curry, this is what you are eating. This is their income. And they walk for miles across the desert, and they feel the landscape with their whole body. And we tend to think of deserts as barren, as arid, as devoid of life. These deserts are living deserts. And we are surrounded by desert grasslands where these demoiselle cranes come in during the winters to winter. The grasses are the mainstay of the life. They sequester carbon as well. And you have gazelles, you have vipers, you have desert cotton, and you have these high-stepping scarab beetles everywhere replenishing, turning the dung over and making the place a little bit more fertile, actually. Everywhere you look, if you know to look, and if you're observant, you'll see signs of life, even if you're in the desert. But it's not easy to live there. And water is life. Survival depends upon being able to find water. And these people, just by knowing the land, know how to find water. Let's come back to that summer day, right? All the fields are lying fallow, and this is what a catchment in a desert looks like. When we think of catchment, we're thinking forests, we're thinking grasslands, we're thinking lush green, but this is a desert catchment. It is hard rock with a gentle slope of about 1 foot over a kilometer. Just that gentle, right? And what people do to prepare in the summer, they know that they're probably going to get 1 day of rain, which will bring that 4 inches that they need. And what they will do is they will collect acacia, thorny acacia bushes, and they will lay them out in semicircles at the bottom of that slope. So this is you can see these semicircles. That's how they lay it in those semicircles, and then they wait. What do they wait for? They wait for sandstorms. So just about, maybe we're in August, so about 2-3 weeks ago, the sandstorms would have begun in the Thar Desert. Blowing sand. If you stand there, it stings your eyes, it stings your skin. You can't stand out. Nobody's outside during a sandstorm, really. And so this sand, it blows itself and it gets stuck in the thorny acacia. And what it builds is a bund of sand. And so you have a slope and you have a bund of sand. And now what do the people wait for? They wait for this. That one day maybe that it will rain, but they're prepared because they've built their bund and the water comes rushing down that gentle slope and comes to rest at the bund. And this is their method of rainwater harvesting. It's an ancient method. And this water, which stops at that bund, will be the mainstay for 8 months for these people, because underneath this desert runs a gypsum layer, which does not allow the water to go too far down and mix with the saline aquifers, the deep saline aquifers. And so it stops at the top, and these people use that water for 8 months for everything. But guess what? At the bottom of this lake are wells. they have built those same percolation wells in there. So when the water is gone, it's gone into the land, it's hot there, so it evaporates as well. These guys then go to their wells, which are at the bottom of these dried up lakes now, and they start pulling up water. And when they pull up water, the percolation wells start pulling in water again to replenish themselves. So another several months, they are taken care of. And when I walked through this desert with Paul Salopek, who is a National Geographic fellow and an explorer who's walking the world, he's somewhere in Korea right now, it was our mainstay. These wells were our mainstay. We pulled up water we were walking through summer, just ridiculous, but we were walking through summer. And the water comes up clean, and that's what kept us going too. Right? Just a little bit of straining, filtering, and that's what it is. But, there's one more thing. That same bund can be used for another reason too. And I am standing, when I took this photo, I'm standing on a bund that is 700 years old. And now what happens is, this is a different structure. It's not just a lake. The water comes down that same kind of slope. It comes to rest at this bund, and people wait for the earth to drink this water deeply. The earth saturates itself with all this water. So if this happened in August, by November, this soil would have taken up all the water, and people would sow the fields. This is rain-fed agriculture in the Thar Desert. Imagine that. And what do they sow? They sow guar bean, they sow herbs, they sow wheat. Can you imagine wheat growing on 1 day's worth of rain? It does. And then this water harvesting structure, which is called this harvesting structure, is also a giving field. It's called a khadin. This feeds 12 to 16 villages around that structure. So they have food and they have water. And all this is a 700, 800-year-old method. If you guys have read Barry Lopez, you might have come across an essay of his called American Geographies, where he talks about the importance of knowing local geographies. Because when you know local geographies, you know how to survive. When you know how to read the land that you're on, you know how to live right. And when you know how to live right, you can be resistant to the interlopers, the people who are far away and who are making plans for your land, who think your land is as interchangeable as any other land. And that's what's happening in the desert in India today. The people sitting in Delhi, for them, that's a wasteland. It's a wasteland to be better utilized. And better utilized for agriculture, their way. Which means they build these canals using a lot of concrete. That's what's got the money. So that's the nexus between the bureaucrats and the contractors and all of that. They build all these, a lot of money. And so they build canals to bring water, Himalayan waters, all the way down to the Thar to green the desert. But guess what happens? First of all, by the time the water reaches the Thar, there's hardly any left. And even what's left is putrid, it's stinking, it's stagnant. It's got things that fall into the canal on the way. There's carcasses. And this district, which didn't even know what a mosquito was, now has the highest incidence of malaria. Why? Because the government, it pushed this canal on the Thar Desert, the deep Thar Desert, and it pipes water to them. So, you think, oh, piped water is a good thing, but the piped water people don't even want to use. They use it for just very random stuff, maybe a camel would drink it or something, but never for anything domestic. They prefer their wells. And each village has wells, so they don't have to walk far. So these women, they go out every morning and every evening, and these women, they're in parda, which is the veil, and for them, these morning and evening trips to the well, that's when they have their social time. So that works too, So here's what's happening when you don't understand your local geographies or you don't respect the land. You take a desert which is living, thriving, and knows how to survive and sustain itself, you turn it from a desert to a dust bowl. And that's the difference. You know, we'd say, oh, it's a deserted land. No, maybe it's a dust bowl. Look again. Maybe we've created something where truly nothing will grow. But a desert is a living desert. So that comes from a mass forgetting of local geographies, and it's happening all across South Asia, where we're destroying the land and we are pushing people to migrate. And where do they migrate to? Overstuffed cities. But here's the rub. Our cities are no better. It's not that they remember their local geographies. Take Bangalore, for where I come from. I live there. We get 3 billion liters per day of rain on an average over the year, and we consume about a little bit more than half of that. And yet, imagine, okay, the desert gets 4 inches and it's self-sufficient. We get 60, 78, 41 inches. We have a lot of rain. We have a lot of flooding. But we've forgotten our geography. Bangalore sits at 950 meters, about 3,000 feet above sea level. We don't have a perennial river. We depend upon the rain, just like the desert, we depend upon the rain for survival. And the brown areas that you see are highlands, and then the water comes, and then you have the valleys. We have 3 valleys in Bangalore, but here's what's happening. Naturally, the natural water flows are being built up. You'll see the black coming in. That's how we're building up the city. Just look at it. We have blocked the water flows. So the water doesn't know where to go. And what ends up happening, you'll see that this is, again, I'm just going to show this. This is one lake. It's connected to another lake, because in a valley, that's how water flows down. And over the years, we have built up those connections. You see how it's building up? It's all concrete. On the left-hand side, you won't be able to read it, of course, but on the left-hand side are all the lakes that our ancestors in the 1500s built. Man-made lakes, because, of course, you know, they want to catch water. And on the right is what has happened to those lakes right now. They're football fields, they're stadiums, they're communities, there's buildings, buildings, buildings everywhere. And so, of course, when it rains, and we get a lot of rain, you have ugly flooding. You have overflowing, stench-filled lakes, because we're putting our sewage into those lakes as well. And what happens? $1-million houses, they're flooded. 2 years ago, we had Lexus and Audis and Mercedes and Maybachs floating in this water. There was millions of rupees gone waste, all because we didn't listen to the land. We built over places which should have been natural waterways. So what we're basically doing is we are shooting ourselves in the foot. The innate resilience of land is being undermined by what we do. And guess what? You know, here's really the irony. In Bangalore, come summer, our wells have run dry. So either there's a lot of water everywhere, not a drop to drink, because when it comes to the summer, this is what happens everywhere. I don't know if any of you caught this. This was just this past summer, where there was just a huge water shortage in a place that gets so much water. And so my friend, the shepherd farmer from the Thar, says, before a drought caused by the shortage of rainfall comes a drought of ideas. And literally it is this, because we do not understand, or we have forgotten our local geographies, which is what lends resilience to the land, and it prepares us for the change that is coming. And so I'm going to leave you with one thought by Wendell Berry, who is just my absolute favorite hero. He's a novelist and a farmer from Kentucky, not far off from here. And he says, what I stand for is what I stand on. And if we can own those local geographies and fight for it, knowing what is right and appropriate for the land, no interloper, no marketing guru with a lot of money and grandiose ideas can ever usurp that, and we will retain our resilience. Thank you.